Welcome back to the channel, everybody. Today we're going to be discussing your DAU or daily active users and the percentage of which are churning or won't be interacting with your online business over the next or consecutive 30 days. So I'm going to show you how to recreate this exact same analysis behind me in MySQL. So here we are, we're going to start with a simple login table. It's just logins per customer. Here's a quick view of that. So let's select a few columns: customer ID, login date. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to add 30 days to this login date, because this is a forward-looking analysis. So I'm going to call this login date 30. Because for each of these records, what we're ultimately trying to understand is, we know that this customer logged in on this date, but did they log in over the next 30 days? So between these two dates, or this interval right here. But this interval also must be a historical date. It can't be in the future, or it can't exceed the date by which our data is through. So that's the next column we're going to bring in. So typically data is available through the prior day in most businesses. Today is September 6, 2024, so I imagine the max login date for this entire data source or data set will be September 5th, 2024, but let's confirm. Make sure that within your over clause, the parameters are empty. We just want the straight max login date value. Okay, great. So just as suspected, the date that our data is through is prior day, so yesterday, September 5th, 2024. And here's our login date, and then login date 30. Now, login date 30 must be less than or equal to this date, which means we must have a leading 30 days of data that already exists and isn't in the future. So let's add that logic in a where clause. We'll add the same columns back in. This is the name of our subselect, players. Okay, so let's add that piece of logic now. It's quite important. So we'll say where 30 days from the login date is still historical data and not in the future, meaning we have this data. We'll call this entire subselect dates. Let's take a look at a few records, and then we'll talk about the next step. Okay, So we have this player that logged in on this date. Now what we need to do is we want to check and see, did this player log in on a date that was greater than this date, but less than or equal to this login date 30? If they did, they retained. If they didn't, then they're churned. And the latter is what we're most interested in. So to do this, we're going to have to join back to the same login table. This is what's called a self-join. We're going to join on customer ID. And the login date in the second table needs to be greater than the login date in our first table. But the login date in the second table can be less than or equal to the login date 30 in our first table. So what this could potentially do, or what it will do, is bring across multiple records. Could bring across at the most 30 records, right? So we need to create a case statement to identify the players that have churned, but turn it into an aggregate case statement to take care of this join that's bringing across as much as 30 records per record in our first table. We'll do case when we'll add a churn flag here. Because we added a min here, we need to do the group by. Okay, great. So when the login date is not null, meaning we find a future date, meaning they're not churned, then scribe a 0, if not a 1, and we're taking the min value, which means at all possible costs, we're looking for someone that hasn't churned. But if that doesn't avail, then it'll default to the 1, which means they've churned. Let's put this in another subselect and we can call it final, because we're essentially done. We simply want the login date. So that's kind of the date of our DAU, our DAU. We want a count of our customer IDs, which is our DAU. And then a count of our churned players. So when the churn flag is equal to 1, then customer ID, else null end, and we will do a count here as well. Okay, wonderful. We are pretty much done. All we need to do is just run this statement, and we are good to go. And again, even though our data is through prior days, September 5th, 2024, with this analysis, we need to have a leading 30 days. So the max date in our analysis will be September 5th, 2024 minus 30 days. Okay, let's move this over to Excel. So here we are in Excel. By day, we have our DAU, we have our 30-day churners. Now to calculate the churn rate, all you gotta do is just divide churners by DAU. And this analysis is effectively done. We can just create a simple chart here in Excel. And this is for all of time, at least for this demo business. Fantastic. So in the blue, we have our DAU, our daily active users. This is your digital audience. In our orange, or in the orange trend line, that's a percentage of which do not log in or interact with your business over the leading 30 days or leading 30 historical days. This is extremely important and interesting because it tells you the percentage of your audience that are going inactive per day. So thank you so much for joining today's session. Please continue to like and subscribe.